No, we don't want it shallow. We don't want it shallow.
Correct.
So the merchant of record duck it looks really fabulous, right? It's swimming, it's gorgeous, it has green feathers.
Almost a swan.
Almost a swan, but underneath the water, the duck is, you don't want that. You want a seamless,
you want a real swan.
You want a real swan.
Given how prominent now real-time payments is in Southeast Asia, it's very important to make sure whoever partner they connect with is not only having direct connections, but having a good network of things that they're connecting directly to, so that there's redundancy. If something goes wrong, they have other paths. So you came from Pinterest, I came from Meta. I'm sure both of us have seen a lot of things that we wish we didn't see, or
right.
Just things that we wish we would known better sooner, right? Like, I think many merchants kind of live through what we live through, and love to hear from your side. What have you seen on Pinterest side?
One of the trends that I think merchants sometimes, particularly if I'm putting my Pinterest hat on, is not understanding that payments has evolved. It's no longer a cost center. Even if I think about, I used to report to the CFO org, cost can be king, but now we're moving toward a world where it's a revenue center. And the players that really understand that, merchants that really understand that, are going to be ahead of the game. So finding the right partner that can be that partner that helps you, with embedded finance and other tools, can really step up your game. And you're going to your CFO, you're going with a revenue focus, and that's where the industry is going. So one of the things that I wish I knew earlier was once I did, it changed the game for me. I'm coming up with initiatives that is way beyond in a new playbook. So that's my advice. Like, really look at your strategy and saying, okay, is this really just a cost play, or can I optimize in different ways that does bring in that revenue for my business line?
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. I've seen so many companies that just make the decision of not even trying to expand outside of their Western markets, because they are already assumed that it's too hard for them to do it themselves, and that the providers they talk to may have painted a picture that reframed them from even making a move.
Right. And just share a little bit more about you. I know you had the Meta thing, of what you're thinking on that.
Yeah, while I was at Meta, towards the end, I was really actively building redundancy and asking my partners if they were building redundancy. Because Meta had its days, right, where I've seen providers that just didn't work out for Meta. It could be financial troubles. It could be regulatory troubles. And, when you work for a really big company, one of the most important things is to make sure that your company name, when it's in the headline, it's done in a positive way, right? So optics is extremely important in the way that the merchant manages it. There are always moments where certain partners may need to be put on pause or terminated in short notice.
Right.
And so I have seen days where we've had to just quickly compromise on taking on a new partner without doing enough homework, because we didn't have redundancy and we didn't have time.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a big lesson that I learned in the earlier days of Meta, and also seeing how my predecessors have done it. And so second half of my career there, that's what I focus on. The other thing is, thinking about now, as we see in Southeast Asia, the user behavior, payment behavior has slowly shifted from being very e-wallet focused to looking at real-time payments, QR, right? That's starting to becoming more prominent than e-wallets.
Right.
And that alone, I think, I would highly advise merchants now to really question their partners. Are you, my partner, yourself building redundancy? Because in the past, you may offer an e-wallet and there's only one path there if you want a direct connection.
Right.
But now you're doing bank payments. There's so many banks in every country. And if you're working with a partner that just goes into the country and do a light touch, right? They may connect
shallow.
Yeah. The better ones, they will go and connect to a bank, but it will be one bank. Maybe two if they realize the first bank doesn't work really well.
Right.
And some may just go straight to a local provider like Xendit, right? But given how prominent now real-time payments is in Southeast Asia, it's very important to make sure whoever partner they connect with is not only having direct connections, but having a good network of banks that they're connecting directly to, so that there's redundancy. If something goes wrong, they have other paths. And that's so important because when we think about infrastructure, internet, right, telecommunications in Southeast Asia, it's not always performing at its optimal level, right? And so things could get dropped so easily if you rely on only one or two bank connections.
Absolutely. From a U.S. lens, what I see the gap is people consider that the U.S. playbook is going to work in Southeast Asia. So to your point, not understanding that depth, that localization is so important, and finding a partner that has grown in the space in that region is so important because, to your point, they have those direct connections to all those banks. They know what to offer you. They can even, these days, if you're not a partner in payments, what are you really,
Yeah.
Because you need consultants, you need that expertise.
There's no 5G everywhere, AT&T everywhere, right?
Right.
And, I recently asked about Indonesia internet. It's famous for not always working to the level you would want. And I said, well, there's satellite connections. If people just switch to satellite, that should solve the problem, right?
Right.
Well, they said, oh, actually, there's so many.
Too many satellites.
No, they said there's so many high buildings in Jakarta.
Yeah.
Jakarta as an example. There's so many high buildings there that's obstructing the satellite from coming through to people.
Okay.
And so if you actually go to the jungle, you can have fabulous connection using satellite.
Who knew?
But not in the capital.
See? Localized expertise right here, hot off the press.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. When I think about the playbook, it really is so important for the redundancy piece, and that localized, it's not going to work like it works in the US and Europe in Southeast Asia. And it has to work for payments. That's like the number one thing. It has to work. So
yeah. And even sometimes the banks themselves, their connection can go down. Years ago, a bank, one of the major banks in Indonesia, their satellite internet went down completely. And it was so severe that it was actually in public news. They made a public announcement. And
talk about that reputation thing where you don't want to be in the news for the wrong thing.
And so no one could log on to their online banking, not through the website, not through the app. But guess what? Xendit customers, they could still make payments with that bank. There was no disruption because Xendit spent so much effort in making sure there's multiple redundancy lines, whether it's physical or digital. And that's really the value you would get when you make sure your partner has redundancy built, not just yourself.
And even from a cloud perspective, I know we have multiple data centers. So when there was another outage on the cloud, we were the only provider actually that was still up and running. Yeah. So exactly. I totally can't agree more. From a merchant perspective, that kind of continuity, key. Yeah.
Okay, so Alicia.
Yes.
Now you're our head of US and you've been living there. What do you see now as like common mistakes that US merchants could be making when they are coming into Southeast Asia?
One of the common mistakes is actually underestimating Southeast Asia and the continual investment that's happening, how quickly it's growing. So I got this interesting stat just recently that $206 billion of foreign investment in Southeast Asia, and it's outpacing China at this point.
Yeah, that's 5 times. That's 5 times more than China.
5 times more than China. And that's actually, a really big indicator that there's investment in the region and then it's not going away. So it's not this small regional play anymore. It's a contender on the table and to be taken seriously.
I'm sure it's getting a boost too from the geopolitical situation around the world right now.
Absolutely.
Right?
And particularly from a US perspective, it's, to be quite frank, it's difficult because of our different sanctions to do business directly with China. So Southeast Asia is this region that you can, more easily from a US standpoint, invest in APAC.
Switzerland of APAC.
It's the Switzerland of APAC, and we all love chocolate, but I guess that's not down here. What we got over here? Durian? Yeah. Everybody loves durian. It's a little tangy. So I would say that it's important to really look at the stats and understand where the greater economy is going. I know US loves to look at itself and care about that. And, I'm in America too. But really looking at the trends, Southeast Asia is here to stay. It's here to play. So you got to work and look at the partners there, look at the ecosystem, see how your business is going to keep up with competitors, because your competitors are looking at Southeast Asia and you want to be able to meet them at that level and supersede them.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's a gap. And even in my former lives, we are now more seriously than ever looking at Southeast Asia. So that's one. And then, when you get there, you open the box and you're like, oh, there's a lot going on. Okay. This ain't cards anymore. This ain't Kansas anymore. And it's a whole nother landscape. So finding a partner like a Xendit that's been homegrown in this space is invaluable. It's not like we're so used to all of the QR payment methods that we talked about, all of the unique situations in which people are shopping specifically in marketplaces like Shopee and Lazada and TikTok Shop. That's not the same in the US. It's the Amazon and the Walmart. So that kind of subject matter expertise, it's so important to get, and not to downplay Southeast Asia is just one of my, and maybe more will come to me as I hear what you have to say.
I'm trying so hard to have a straight face when I speak with you, but I can't.
Don't let it hang.
You miss your calling. You gotta be a comedian one day.
Okay,
payments comedian.
You
That's
gotta
what
be my opener.
Yeah,
and it could be a song.
I can be your opener. And you mentioned about partners, right?
Yeah.
I also think for U.S. merchants or just merchants that are outside of APAC, right? When they think about going to Southeast Asia, I see some merchants, they tend to then go with what they're familiar with, right? The big names that I hear about in the US.
The biggest booth at MRC or Money 2020, honey. Yes.
Yeah. And, from my time that I spent in Asia, I lived there for more than a decade. I see that mistake being made over and over. If they go with those big names that they're familiar with, they come in, and what they don't realize is these big names, they don't always have, they can't always move the needle in the local markets, right? The way they enter, to be frank, it's quite shallow.
No, we don't want a shallow. We don't want a shallow.
Correct.
We don't want a black box. We're past.
Because when things happen, right? When problems arise, or when you're trying to navigate a really complex situation, you want a partner who has the direct relationships and connections, both, who has the direct connection, both relationship-wise and platform-wise, who can solve problems for you directly, locally on the ground, in local language, right? with the banks, with the regulators.
The regulators is such an important one.
Yeah. Someone who knows how to navigate, because politics can be complex everywhere you go, as we know.
Indonesia, for example, right? Like,
so
complicated.
I wouldn't rely on an Indonesian to solve a U.S. problem.
Right.
And because the U.S. landscape also has its nuances, right?
Right.
And so I think the U.S. merchants, they, when they come in, they need to kind of put themselves in the other shoes.
The best foot forward. Can't agree more. One of the points that really, I mean, even coming here and getting even more knowledge and wisdom about Southeast Asia, just how complex, how fragmented it is, and how Xendit has really started from that place and made it so unified is really amazing. Yeah. And honestly, part of why I came here, I'm like, if you could make Indonesia easy, you're going to make my life easy, So I couldn't agree more. Very complicated markets that kind of feel taboo can become easy if you pick the right partner who knows what they're doing. Yeah.
No, absolutely. My previous employers, multiple, have tried going to Indonesia and get their license. And then they realized that it's, I don't want to say impossible, but it's really difficult, right? And so then they ended up having to think about how to partner because they couldn't do it themselves.
You gave me an amazing fact about Indonesia and Xendit, and I totally forgot it.
Was it GDP?
Tell me. Yes.
So, I think that these facts are so little known. Yeah. But earlier I mentioned, merchants need to make sure the partners they choose to go into Southeast Asia with can move the needle. Right. So Xendit actually processes 3 to 4% of the GDP in Indonesia.
That's really
and
impressive.
6 to 8% of the GDP in the Philippines. Yeah. And you want that kind of partner, right? Because that kind of partner, the government will give you face time.
We're definitely processing the social security of Indonesia as well, which if you could deal with the government in Indonesia, you got it made. Okay. Yeah. And that goes to another level of like, if they trust us from a compliance security perspective, that's assurance. Yeah. So I love that. I love that we're at that scale. It really just, from a standing in this position, makes me quite proud. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. And a majority of merchant of records are not actually doing any of the payment processing at all. They're just an entity. They have an entity, and then they're leveraging a Xendit or another, a Xendit as their acquiring partner. So when you look at it that way, what are they really doing? I'm not sure what they're doing. What you paying them for? Because we're doing the work, we're actually processing the payments. So you're paying them to hold an entity and do some taxes, and that's beautiful. But at the same time, transparency. Yeah. Is that a black box? How many layers you want on your cake? You want that weird crunchy layer? You don't know what's in the middle? I don't know. I don't.
Yeah. You want your nuggets to be real meat.
Yes. So I would say that, it sounds really pretty and it can be very shiny and typically biggest booth, right? Because it has to have a quite nice veneer for you not to look underneath the hood and realize it's, that duck that's like, So I brought that one back.
We have to talk about that duck.
The duck!
We have to talk about that duck.
Yes. Right. We'll talk about the merchant of record duck. So the merchant of record duck it looks really fabulous, right? It's swimming. It's gorgeous. It has green feathers.
Almost a swan.
But underneath the water, the duck is, and you don't want that. You want a seamless,
you want a real swan.
You want a real swan. You want a real swan. So I think it's really important who you partner with. Again, we've talked about this in extensive amounts, but you want a good partner. You don't want someone who's just sending your data around, like a lot of these merchant records are just data aggregators. They don't actually have the robustness to process their own payments. They're partnering with.
It's quite hacky the way they do it, right?
Right, and then from a compliance perspective, what to do, right? That can change in any moment because they don't have the direct licenses. They're just really leveraging the entity. So then you can get yourself into that sticky situation, like we were just talking about, where you feel safe, but you ain't.
Yeah, because regulations can change.
Right.
The moment regulation changes, policy changes, who you're working with may become out of compliance overnight, right?
Because they don't have direct investment in that country truly.
Yeah.
They're not processing payments. They don't got that skin in the game. So yeah, I would really, even if I'm a merchant, that's something that I'm really considering, because I don't want that issue where all of a sudden I have to go to my CFO and say, hey, that broke and I don't have a backup.
Our money's stuck.
Yeah.
We may have to wait a few months before we try to onboard a second provider.
We got to do an RFP. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's what I would say about merchant of record. And it's something that even for me was a shocking realization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so nice to chat with you today.
Yes, Tracy. Always a pleasure.
Let's help the world to not have to work with partners that are
low. No shallow partners. Depth.
All right.
Such a pleasure, Tracy.
Likewise, Alicia.
Yes.